So I'm going to tell you right up front, this is probably the coolest thing I've seen this year in cycling tech. Now, admittedly, there's been nothing else announced this year in cycling tech, so the bar is pretty low, but still, I think this is awesome stuff. What it is that Hammerhead and Suunto have teamed up to bring you heat maps onto the Karoo series. But more than that, this now means that if you do workouts on the Hammerhead Karoo or Karoo 2, it now pushes up into your Suunto account, if you have such an account. So this first portion of the video, I'm going to talk about heat maps, and then after that, I'm going to talk about the Suunto sync. And that sync is interesting because it actually syncs beyond Suunto. So if you have, for example, today's plan, it'll sync your data to today's plan as well. But first, let's back up and talk about the heat maps and the partnership. You need basically three things for this to work. One, a Karoo 1 or a Karoo 2. Two, a Suunto account. And three, to link those two together. Technically, you also need a fourth thing, which is to update the firmware on your Hammerhead Karoo or Karoo 2, which I've already done right here. Once I've done that, I've got this new Suunto Heatmaps option in the menu. Now, the first time you come upon this menu, you're going to see the fact that it's not actually authorized yet. So you need to go ahead and authorize your account on the Hammerhead dashboard or from the app itself here. It's pretty straightforward to do. And then a couple seconds later, that Suunto Heatmap option toggles into being live and ready to roll. At the very top, you'll see it'll say account connected. You can then download heat maps, and then it'll first show you the ability to download heat maps for the maps you've already downloaded. So in this case, I have the Canary Islands, Morocco, Corsica, Italy, Netherlands, Spain, and Switzerland already downloaded, ready to go. But only one of these I've got the heat maps. That's that little heat icon next to it, or the hot icon, calorie icon. It's just bringing the heat. That's all I know. But let's say I want to download the heat maps for Corsica. I just simply tap this, and it says, boom, Suunto heat maps for Corsica, 70 megs. You'll note that the heat maps are actually bigger than the base maps, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But it also makes sense. So these heat maps are coming from Suunto's larger dataset. That dataset has over a decade of activities in it, cycling and non-cycling, but here they're only filtering for cycling. Suunto says they're talking like tens of millions of activities here for cycling that are pulled into these heat maps, which is why the sizes are so big. Still, in the case of the Karoo 2, you got 26 gigs to work with. I've got a lot of maps downloaded because I'm just that kind of guy. You can see here, the Netherlands, for example, that heat map has 1.2 gigs. The base map is only 1.1 gigs. And it's even more if I look at Spain. In the case of Spain there, the base map is 1.7 gigs, but the heat map is 3.6 gigs. And again, I've got so much other maps already downloaded. I've also got a bunch of other really silly stuff on this unit, like Zwift and Trainer Road and Spotify and screen. I got a bunch of weird stuff. You can check out that like video or post somewhere on the screen there if you want to do that too. Okay, the actual downloading itself is quick and easy. Again, if I just go to Corsica and click Suunto Maps and click Update, it just goes off and does it. In a couple seconds, it'll be done just like any other map using Wi-Fi and all the magic of wireless internet connectivity. So then let's rewind to this past weekend when I went out on a 90-kilometer ride. And I had a route already predetermined. This is like the Great Tulip Route. It's tulip season here in the Netherlands, and I wanted to see all the tulips. And I do this like every year, I just meander. And I went out there like armed with a drone and all the goodness to catch all the tulips I could possibly find. And when I designed this route, I made it so that I had the best chance of finding the tulip fields, which means I was like, scouring Instagram and maps and all sorts of stuff based on where I thought the fields were. But once I got out riding, sometimes there was a field like over yonder that I could see. It was like, you know what? What if I went over that road instead? Would that work out? And normally I would just have to hope for the best. And to be fair, in the Netherlands, that's a pretty safe bet. But what was awesome about this is I could literally look at the screen and go, oh yeah, there's lots of cycling heat over there. And that's off I would go. And I would go off on that road and wander for any number of kilometers, and then eventually just would reroute me automatically back to my route as I was going along. And that's ideally what this is for. So almost a non-routing type of things. But it's arguably far more useful for just meandering. The idea to be able to look at this and go, yeah, I'm gonna go that way because that's where the heat is, without any sort of routing at all, and have a pretty safe bet that, there's probably good cycling over there because, again, it's just cycling data. There are a couple of course caveats. Number one is that from a routing standpoint, if you're using routing on this, it will not use any of that heat map data. It's going to ignore it all. But both Suunto and Hammerhead said maybe down the road that'll change. But for now, it's going to use its normal route algorithms for the routing. The heat maps is merely for you and merely a layer on top of it all. Number two, once you've linked your account to Suunto, your data will contribute back up to Suunto's heat maps based on the privacy settings of your Suunto account. So just keep that in mind, of course. Not a big surprise there, I suppose. Number three. You don't have to download these Suunto heat maps if you don't want to. So you can link up your Suunto account and just do the Suunto sync I'll talk about in just a second without any actual downloading of the heat at all. So that's certainly an option as well. Oh, hey, and a quick note, if you are finding this video interesting and useful, if you could just whack that like button down there, it really does help out this video quite a bit. It's like giving it like a heat map for the video for YouTube. It does help out quite a ton. Still, it's hard to describe just how big a difference it is between the heat maps you see on this and something like the Garmin Edge series, which has a popularity routing, the little purple line that you barely see see on there. But just to kind of demonstrate this briefly, I walked outside and I put these side by side, and you can see the glowing radiation of heat coming from the heat maps on the Karoo 2 with nothing coming from the Garmin. Like, I was standing right next to a trail here in Amsterdam that serves thousands, if not probably tens of thousands of cyclists every single day. And on the Garmin, it's like nothing ever happens here. And of course, admittedly, not all of the cyclists here are using Strava, but this is a core way of getting out to many of the routes that people do use when they're riding road bikes or so-called race bikes here to get out into kind of those countryside areas. Now, the next piece of this whole puzzle is the uploading into the Suunto cloud. So if you already have a Suunto watch, then this allows you to get your Hammerhead data into the Suunto app so you can see it there, and you'll see your training load and your training status, all the kind of stuff is updated automatically using these rides. When you get to the end of a ride, you'll see an option at the bottom just next to like Strava and Training Peaks and the other connections you might have in your Hammerhead account, and you can toggle that on or off per ride. By default, it'll be on for your account once you've linked up Suunto, and then it pushes off to the Suunto cloud. Literally like 2 seconds later, you get a notification saying, boom, your ride's been uploaded into the Suunto app, and you can view it there. You can now analyze that ride like any other activity from your Suunto watch. You can dig into it. You also get training load information, so even if you don't have a power meter or a heart rate sensor, you'll get that information calculated automatically for the Hammerhead rides. One caveat though is I didn't get any calorie information transferred to the Suunto platform. It just showed like 0 there, which is kind of weird. I figured like Suunto would calculate that. I shot that over to Suunto and they're digging into it, and hopefully that'll be fixed soon. Next, one notable thing to be aware of though is that this will not be sent back to your Suunto watch. So if you're wearing a Suunto watch and you have your training status there, you're not going to get that updated if you just go out and ride with just the Hammerhead itself. And that's because Suunto doesn't push from their app platform down to the watch for the training load information. So if you want your training load updated on your watch, you have to still record that activity on your watch. But the app itself will show up to date no matter which source you use. Maybe down the road, Suunto will update that. And I suspect probably depending on how the partnership goes. And this is something I asked them. I said, hey, is this like a one-time wonder, or is this potentially the start of greater things? And they said they want to see how this goes over the next few months, see the reaction to it, and then based on that, they'd love to expand it if there is positive reaction to it. And then you may be wondering, like, is this some sort of precursor to a merger and acquisition? And the answer is simply no. And you can kind of put the pieces together. Starting with the Suunto side, they're not going to buy Hammerhead because Hammerhead was just bought by SRAM a few months ago. So SRAM's not about to sell something they just bought that they want for their kind of larger cycling goals. Plus, Suunto couldn't probably afford this anyways. And then inversely, SRAM's certainly not going to get in the watch business. That's the last thing they want to deal with. They've got all the partners out there today, and getting in the watch business is messy and a lot of money and just a bad idea in general. Instead, this is going to be like a friends with benefits sort of relationship. They're going to use each other as they need to, but at the end of the day, they're going to stay separate. That's probably the way it's going to work best for these two. But it is a super cool integration and something we see so rarely. The last time we saw something like this was with the Trailforks and Garmin integration, where they pulled in the Trailforks data back like 3 to 5 years ago. And that's still technically live, but we don't hear anything about that integration anymore. It just sort of happens behind the scenes. Hopefully we'll hear more about this down the road if they decide to expand it further. Anyways, hopefully you found this interesting and useful. Go ahead and whack that like button at the bottom there, or hit subscribe for plenty more sports technology goodness. With that, have a good one.